It is Friday, April 17th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, we got another very packed week. There's a ton to go over, so let's start with our PlayStation Plus reminder, the April games that are currently available: Uncharted 4 and Dirt Rally 2.0. You still got a lot of time to grab these or add them to your library. Let's start with PS4 Firmware 7.50, optional firmware. It's currently available. You don't have to install this as of right now, but like we discussed a little over a month ago when the beta for this went out, and all the firmware is really prior to this, no major consumer-facing features, unfortunately. So it's just that typical system software performance improvement stability, making your PS4 much more stable than it already was. Moving forward, the 0.5 increments, the even whole numbers of the firmware lineup is probably going to be just this, where no major features moving forward near the end of the PS4's life cycle. But actually, if we could go back to the PS Plus offerings, Uncharted 4 is one of those games, right? Well, it turns out you're getting more Uncharted with Sony's Play at Home initiative, where they are encouraging people to do just that. Play at home, stay at home, quarantine. They're giving away 2 additional free games with no PlayStation Plus required. You're getting Uncharted, the Nathan Drake Collection, and Journey. Now, these 2 games have been on Plus before, so a lot of people probably already have them. They're very popular, but there is no Plus required, and it's been confirmed that if you have the PS Plus versions of these games, meaning really just the license attached to your account, so if your Plus subscription were to lapse, you would lose access to Journey and Uncharted the Collection, right? Well, you can go to the store and buy these again, as in you can attach this license to your account. It overrides your Plus license, so that way if your Plus subscription does lapse, you still have access to the Uncharted Collection and Journey, so not a bad deal there. This is going to last until May 5th. And on top of this, Sony's also starting a $10 million fund for independent developers. This is actually also on top of the $100 million fund that they previously announced just overall from Sony Corp, right? That was the fund that goes out to victims, hospitals, healthcare workers, things like that. This $10 million is allocated to the independent developers that are currently working on PlayStation games, I'd imagine. But I would assume there's just an application process that some developers can file here to hopefully get a grant out of this fund, which is great. That's awesome. It's always nice to see some love and support going to the independent developers from Sony. Now, it also didn't take us very long to get an update here, but Gamescom will in fact not be taking place this year due to the coronavirus. Previously, they had said they'll wait around mid-May to make a decision here, but that was already made for them, considering that these quarantines keep getting pushed further and further out, these shutdowns, these mandates. So Gamescom will, in fact, go full on with a digital presence, which they were already committing to anyway, but now they have to transform every aspect of the show to accommodate for that. But, we've seen this previously with a lot of companies adapting to this new change, so a lot of working from home, a lot of conference calls, and with a situation like this, a lot of live streams. So Gamescom opening night live will be a thing, and again, every other aspect of the show will have to be transformed a bit to accommodate for this. Now, moving on to Godfall, we got some new details on this game from the official PlayStation magazine. And what's funny is that this game is in kind of a unique position in that Sony's not heavily involved in this project, right? It's not a Sony developer. It's being published by Gearbox. And it was the first technically revealed and shown next-generation PlayStation 5 game, whereas we've got plenty of third parties announcing next-generation versions, but they're not doing it in a way where they're making a trailer up for, or they did a huge blog post. It's not like an official announcement. They're very much focused on current-generation platforms. And then we learned from the Microsoft side of things, where their first party is still mandating that all those games be released on Xbox One alongside Series X. So, interestingly, not even a Sony first-party title, but Godfall is our first truly next-gen game, and that is the details we're learning, is that from the PlayStation magazine, we have found out that Godfall is, in fact, PlayStation 5 and PC, so if there were any doubts in your mind that this game was cross-gen, would be available on PS4, it is PS5 and PC at a minimum. PC, of course, accounting for multiple configurations, but still a very good minimum that is being set here, especially from the perspective of PlayStation 5. We are learning that it's made by a team of 75 people. The gameplay, it's a very Monster Hunter World-esque with elements of Dark Souls when it comes to combat. The game rewards very aggressive play styles, so skill-based combat is based on timing in order to hit for the maximum amount of damage against enemies. The visual style and the world building is influenced by the Stormlight Archive, the First Law, and Foundation series. At the start of the game, it's based on armor classes. There's 3 sets to pick from, a lot of customization as you go through it. Remember, we have been told before this is kind of like a looter shooter, but it's more of a looter hack and slash, so There'll be a lot of item drops, customization, things like that. And it will very much focus on the seamlessness of dropping in and out with other players. So kind of like Destiny, where there's no major commitment to the play session you're going for. People can just kind of jump into your session, play along with you, leave at their own leisure. That makes it very convenient, very good. Overall, I think it sounds very fascinating. We'll have to see a lot more of this game to draw any sort of real conclusions about what we're hearing so far. But it is weird. This game's finding itself in a place where I think a lot of people are lukewarm on it or wouldn't necessarily care too much, but the fact that it's, well, a actual PlayStation 5 game that we know of and can see a little bit of, more people are clinging onto that than anything else. Now let's get to release dates. The Last of Us Part 2, of course. Everyone's still wondering when this game will get released. Well, this is where we're running into situations of people constantly looking at product pages and the preload section of their PS4 to see what's, where it's all falling here. And what we are noticing is that there was an Amazon listing for Last of Us Part 2 being pegged to release on June 26th, which would be the same date as Ghost of Tsushima. Then a few days later, Ghost of Tsushima's date changed to August 1st on one of the official PlayStation websites. I don't think it was the US site, I believe it was Canada, but that one got moved a bit. So people were led to believe that, especially if you look at this in sequential order, right? The Last of Us got moved to the same date as Ghost of Tsushima, then Tsushima got moved to August. So there's a lot of speculation here in terms of what's going on. So here's the problem with product listings, and especially even from the official site, is that there are so many examples where this stuff just falls flat on its face, right? Now, we have tons of examples of product listings absolutely revealing things that we didn't need to know about so soon, right? But it's very easy to also discredit these situations. Now, August 1st is a Saturday, so a game's not going to release on a Saturday. It's just not. It's like when you look at a placeholder date of December 31st and people initially go, oh my god, is that the release date of PlayStation 5? Because there's so many pre-order pages that have shown up like that, and it's just like, guys, it's not gonna release then. It's a placeholder. So games don't release on a Saturday. That's pretty bogus, and I think that's already been corrected since then. Basically, we don't have any updates. No official updates out of Sony. Whenever they are ready to tell us about the release timeline for these games, they will do so. And it is still a thing, though, where Ghost of Tsushima is still aiming for June 26th, despite The Last of Us being up in the air in this weird purgatory of they don't know how to release it or when to release it just yet. So it can't be that close to Ghost of Tsushima. I still want to see what they're going to do with that game. It has to get moved, right? You would think. So we still have to wait from Sony to see how that plays out, but don't buy any product listings just yet. Now, this is a good segue, though, to our next news story, which is more product listings, and this one definitely stirred the pot and caught a lot of attention. Amazon France had some PC versions of Days Gone, Last of Us Part 2, Gran Turismo Sport, Persona 5 Royal, but then also Super Mario Odyssey listed. Now, I believe Odyssey was like the last one that got put up, so once that one was discovered, people knew right away that this was kind of nonsense and like totally ridiculous. But actually, Sony followed up quickly with a PR statement confirming that these are not accurate listings. They have not announced anything for PC outside of Horizon Zero Dawn, right? Sega followed up, hey, Persona 5 Royal is not coming to PC, we have nothing to announce. All the listings are taken down, so obviously this is a situation where people got a little worked up seeing more PC releases after something like Horizon. But, even seeing The Last of Us on there, that kind of already told us that it was ridiculous, because we already know Sony's stance on this topic. They've already issued a statement, like, what, a month and a half, 2 months ago, where Herman Hall said, we're not going to do day-and-date PC releases, right? I mean, they already explained, look, we are experimenting. Horizon's our first really major title. We're still evaluating the space. It's on a game-by-game basis. But we've also explained it's a 3-year-old game, sold over 10 million copies on PS4. It just makes sense. And also, look at how this really played out here. When Horizon was being rumored and websites would reach out, Jason Schreier would reach out, Sony wouldn't have any comment to make regarding Horizon going to PC. These listings come up, and they're very quick to say that these are completely inaccurate. So that tells you right away that Sony knows to nip this one in the bud. Normally, if they're dead silent on the topic, that's more telling than anything. That's where it gets pretty vague and unknown in terms of what they're doing or what they're planning. But, Yeah, this one you could smell a mile away. Now moving on to our PlayStation 5 cover story, this is a report coming out of Bloomberg, which they state they've spoken with a number of developers. They claim they've spoken with people familiar with the matter, and they've made a number of interesting claims about PlayStation 5. So keep in mind, from this point forward, 100% a rumor, nothing fact, but the report claims that Sony's going to be manufacturing about 5 to 6 million PlayStation 5s by the end of March 2021. Now, for context, that's a little bit lower than what we saw on PlayStation 4, where Sony sold, not just shipped and manufactured, but sold around 7.5 PlayStation 4s. So if these numbers hold up, we're looking at about a 15 to 20% reduction in the amount of available units that Sony will be making and sending out to retailers. The main reason for this is not the virus, not coronavirus whatsoever, but rather the price of the parts and the scarcity of the components that are needed to manufacture this hardware. Now, if this sounds familiar, that's because it is. We had another Bloomberg report about a month and a half ago, however long ago that was, that stated that Sony was struggling trying to keep the price of the components low enough, and that they were trying to allocate more resources, basically the SSD and the RAM. They were having a tough time allocating all those parts and actually trying to re-diverge some of those components straight to PlayStation 5 and away from other consumer electronics. So that is still from Bloomberg, but very much there's a little bit of consistency here. They claim that they've also spoken with some developers, and some developers think that this hardware is going to be definitely priced around $499, give or take a little bit. One analyst claims that they could potentially go as low as $449, but they would absolutely be eating a cost at that point. They'd be selling the hardware at a loss, and that because of that, Sony is looking at PlayStation 4 to lean on that a little bit to get them through this transitional period where, you know, PS4 obviously a system centered around services. It's got the PlayStation Store, it's got PlayStation Plus, so that would be one way for Sony to eat a lot of cost going into releasing PlayStation 5 in a lower volume and eating up a little bit of the PS5 losses during this manufacturing process. The report also claims that Sony's promotional timeline for this hardware has been completely upended by the virus, so that was one thing that was directly affected. The DualSense reveal was apparently rushed because that was going out to developers and they had to reveal it to not deal with leaks, basically, so they got to show it off on their own terms, which was that very quick PlayStation blog write-up post. But they do claim that the whole promotional campaign, any sort of live event, was definitely cast aside because of what we're going through right now. The report claims that mass manufacturing is scheduled to begin in June, and as of right now, part suppliers are sending everything needed to the factory right now to begin that process, and that there is no delay imminent. It even references Xbox Series X. If Microsoft is still committed to releasing this holiday season, then basically so is Sony. Now, with all that said, let's really digest this, and to be honest, there's nothing in here that sounds really out there, far-fetched, or inaccurate. I mean, a lot of this is very believable, and for good reason. The promotional stuff, for example, I mean, if this isn't completely obvious to you that the company had a promotional timeline for this console and those plans have been dramatically shifted because of the circumstance we've found ourselves in, I mean, how do you not see that, right? I mean, Microsoft is in the same scenario. Now, granted, we've seen a lot more of Series X versus PS5, but Microsoft showed the Series X a lot, like, very early. You know, when you look at the previous generation, they waited until May, the same year that they shipped the Xbox One, to reveal that console formally, where they showed the box, the controller, games, everything. That was their first presentation. That was in May. We're not even in May today. So obviously the roles were just a bit shifted this generation, where Sony wanted to go second, and they wanted to go around May, June, you know, around that area. Which, keep in mind, if they're going to be beginning manufacturing in June, that's when raw parts and the case and shell of this thing will be sent out to will be sent out to the factories. So we will see the hardware design of this machine sooner than you think. We saw the PS4 design E3 2013. I mean, June, July, that's E3 territory already. So, I mean, we're going to see the box soon enough. I mean, I know people are getting impatient, but wait another month and a half. We'll probably get a console design reveal. It'll probably just be another PlayStation blog post, which will be really disappointing. Well, actually, Mark Cerny did mention a teardown video, so that will probably be coming. In fact, that would probably be their console hardware reveal, if anything else. I'd be fascinated to see how they do that. Will it be pictures first or the teardown first? I don't know. But the parts and the manufacturing and the cost of this hardware. This is where I think people are getting a little bit of a, I don't know, sticker shock. which is ironic because a year ago when we were talking about PlayStation 5 and the very early rumors and how theoretically powerful this thing was going to be, that it was sounding, also accounting for inflation, that this thing might be priced around the $499 territory, and that a lot of consumers actually were probably going to be okay with that. Now people, and I think a lot of this plays into the console stuff, right, where it's people are still hung up on the teraflop specs, comparing it to Series X. There's now this expectation that it has to be cheaper than Series X, which is still silly to me because these companies are putting their stock in different areas of their box, right? And there's certain aspects of manufacturing hardware where the price of the components plays a key role. Something as minor as not including a lithium-ion battery in the Xbox Series X controller is millions and millions of dollars in long term of shipping every one of those boxes to a retailer. Same thing with PlayStation 5. Sure, most of its specs are under Series X, but look at that SSD. That thing is not going to be cheap. We've already heard that the cooling mechanism, again, this is the same report from Bloomberg, but they're claiming that the cooling mechanism that they went with is more than $1 per box, whereas that typically was a component under $1. You know, things like these, as minor as they seem, this is I mean, we're looking at $300 million, $500 million, upwards of $1 billion per component for every one of these machines, right? So it's not as simple as saying, well, it should be cheaper because it's less powerful than Series X, right? It's just not that simple. Microsoft has situations where they're cutting corners and they're, upping the performance of their box, whereas Sony is upping the SSD. They put a lot of R&D into Tempest, 3D audio. It's just different priorities. That doesn't mean it will be a cheaper box. In fact, it more than likely will hit around $499. And the fact that they want to offset that with PlayStation 4, also very believable. Consoles are typically sold at a loss. This is very normal. It's foreign for a console to come out the gate profitable. It happens, but it's not very frequent. PlayStation 4 even came out at a loss. Now, with PS4, it actually only took a few months for that console to be profitable. Within the first year, they turned profit on the hardware, which, great for Sony, but they are in a position, at least this time around, where they can take loss on the hardware and offset that a bit. To really illustrate my point here, PlayStation 4, an internet-connected console with PlayStation Plus, the PlayStation Store, PS Now, downloads, microtransactions, that is a substantial amount of revenue. Far more than, we have scenarios where 1/4 of PS4 sales or one fiscal year of PlayStation 4 hardware, software, services made more money than the entirety of the PlayStation 2 generation. Back then, it was really tough actually to make it in this business. You sold one box and you hoped that one box just had a very high software attach rate where that one particular PS2, that one particular PS1, that user bought some peripherals, they bought some controllers, but more importantly, they bought a lot of games. It's different. Nowadays, Sony can make a lot of money off of one particular title if somebody buys a lot of microtransactions, if they are a PS Plus subscriber. So these are things that they're not foreign. This is totally expected, and to be honest, it's probably what Sony's looking at right now with price in this box. I'm sure they're definitely looking at Series X, seeing what happens there. They mention in the Bloomberg article that North America is a territory that is very much still up for debate. And it is, because the numbers are very close between PS4 and Xbox One. Like we just mentioned that, I think, last week, where Europe, Sony's got a substantial lead, same with Japan, many other second and third world countries. But America, a very important market, and Microsoft has a lot of ground there. So it is a place where Sony's going to want to really heavily focus on that price, take whatever loss that they might need, and put out a very compelling box and try to offset their losses with their currently very successful PlayStation 4 platform. And remember, Jim Ryan stated he wants this hardware to see a global release, unlike PlayStation 4, where actually Japan had to wait a little bit longer for that hardware. He feels that this time around, he wants it to be global. So 5 to 6 million units within the first 4 or 5 months, let's say. That would be around March 2021, again, depending on where it launches this year. It will be a bit more scarce, but I think a lot of headlines are making it seem like it's substantially lower, which that's how I read it at first mistakenly. But really, it's a slight reduction, but accounting for a global launch, it might be a little difficult to get your hands on this thing, depending on where you are, how many retailers are available to you, how many big box retailers, like very high volume stores, how many units they'll get. It might be like that. This will be a wait and see approach. Of course, we'll discuss more when we hear more. Next up, Ghost of Tsushima. We got some new details here from the official PlayStation magazine, the same one from the Godfall information. And this is great to hear, if only because, yeah, this game will probably get delayed, but, it seems close enough, and to me, it seems like we haven't seen and heard enough from Sucker Punch, whereas, like, The Last of Us, which is also very close to Ghost of Tsushima, right? We've seen more from them, right? It's a bigger game, so it needs more media attention, but still, I don't think we're seeing enough of this game just yet. But anyway, some of the new details that we learned, really one, that this game will not have waypoints. So it's an open world, right? But they want you to focus more on landmarks when you're exploring in this game. They want you to be able to see, across this vista, one particular tower or something like that, and that's your waypoint to understand, hey, that's where I need to go to finish this objective. And this is a rolling open world where, for the amount of time you keep spending in the game, it's a day and night cycle, and the game will tell you, like, title by title as it follows through. Day 1, day 2, day 3. We saw a little bit of this in the footage, and it's been explained a little bit to us. People are a little concerned that they might be penalized for trying to explore too much in this game, to where you might lose a little bit of control from the enemies in the game, which that's what you really have to do, right? Go around and fight these guys, regain a lot of this territory. But, there's still a lot of unknowns, but it is interesting that there is no waypoints. This is a design characteristic we're seeing become a little bit more popular now. Breath of the Wild did it. Some games are making this optional, where you can turn off a vast majority of the HUD and, what's displayed in game for a more immersive experience, if you want to call it that, right? I don't think that's really the best word to use, but try to not let your screen get all clogged up with all this arbitrary information, which I'm all for if it's more of a rewarding experience rather than annoying. That's something that, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I don't know about you, but if I'm not actively working on like a puzzle or trying to figure something out that needs to be figured out, if I just straight up don't know where to go because the game hasn't properly conveyed that to me, that really annoys me. So if it is kind of Breath of the Wild-esque, where it really just rewards experimentation, exploring, looking around, and it doesn't actively work against you, then that is absolutely the right direction I want them to go. Now let's get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry. I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to pay for your games. Those are some of the news stories that I want to talk about you all. On Tuesday, we did random PS1 games from eBay, only $50. Go check out that unboxing. Wasn't our best one. We were bound to get burned on one of those, but that's all right. We'll obviously do more down the road where we may or may not get lucky. That's the fun of it. This coming Tuesday, another scenario where I don't know what video I'll have prepared, but there will be one there for sure. And that is it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.